Everyone, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first up, we have announcements. First, I'd like to make a motion to have a public hearing to consider a local law amending the Irvington Code to put limitations on parking commercial vehicles. That's for Monday, March 16th at 7 p.m. at Village Hall. If I can have a second on that. All in favor? Aye. Mary Ann, did you want to give us a little info on that?
There's one amendment changes the definition of commercial vehicle, actually to make it clearer, it's not really a substantial change. Then it adds parking limitations on commercial vehicles, and it provides it shall be unlawful to park a commercial vehicle on the following village streets at any time. This is an important exception. Unless the vehicle displays a local business parking permit issued pursuant to another section which already exists, another change, or is parked while providing service or delivery on pretty much on the downtown streets, north and south, yes, north and south.
We can't hear you.
And then there's a provision right now that says that no vehicle can be parked more than 12 inches from the curb, and it was just modified some to say that no vehicle may be parked with any part of its wheels on the curb, nor may be parked more than 12 inches. Then the other change is to create a new section providing for local business vehicle parking permits. And a local business is a business that has its principal place or office of business downtown. It's the same area defined for the local, there's right now local residential parking permits. And this is the same area, but if you're a business there, businesses have its principal office there. And then they can get up to 2 local business vehicle parking permits. If the local business moves, they automatically lose the parking permit. Otherwise, it pretty much follows what the residential permits are, except, no vehicles with more than 4 wheels are prohibited from obtaining a local business vehicle parking permit. And the main point of this permit is it allows you to park on those streets. But it makes clear that while you can park on those streets, you still have to observe whatever the parking regulations are. So if there's 2-hour parking, you can't park for more than 2 hours. In that way, it's different than the residential parking permit. But you can park on them. You might just say,
Okay.
Any questions, this board understands?
Absolutely. That was, I think that's the 3rd iteration or so, at least the 2nd iteration.
Yeah, it's been around a few times. What's totally new is the local vehicle parking permit. That's new. And that was to address the concerns that the local businesses have.
Great, yeah, so that's Monday, March 16th. Also, we're going to have a budget workshop next Wednesday, March 11th. That's the Recreation and Parks Department, correct?
Yes, correct.
And is that the final?
Pretty much we'll have to make some decisions then, right?
Yeah, I think that's the final
Today's the last one.
department coming in.
Yes.
And lastly, we had a check over $25,000 for our village purchasing policy. That was part of the Hudson Youth Park culvert, the last payment for that, Larry? Close, okay. That was $211,831.72. Hopefully we see the dividends of that in the spring. Any other announcements? Board? If not, we'll go on to correspondence. The one piece of correspondence we actually received is a petition, but that's related to our public hearing, so we will hold that over for the public hearing. Next up, we have public comments on anything not on the agenda tonight. And I'll ask everyone to limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes. Does anyone have anything that's not on the agenda tonight?
Yes.
Please.
I'd like to know why,
You have to come to the,
excuse me?
yeah, there's a microphone.
Oh. I'd like to know why, Mr. Mayor, alternate side of the street parking on residential streets is not enforced. People do not use common sense. So we take a street like Park Avenue. It's narrow. And people not using common sense park on either side of the street. So what should a 40-year resident do? Call the police every time?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I have to do on Riverview Road, because we have the same issue. People park on both sides, and I've actually had it where you physically can't get through.
Yes, that's exactly it.
So I think what I've done is you call the non-emergency number, 591-8080, and tell them, hey, this has been a recurring problem. Again, if someone parks one time, maybe you say, you know, it's okay, someone didn't know, but I see it recurring again and again, and you say, hey, just by the way, can you make sure that you come up, because this is a recurring issue.
Three good police officers have come, and they've knocked on the door of the resident to move the car. But the same car continues to be parking on the wrong side of the street. Wouldn't a ticket help the matter?
I think it would, and I think my guess is that the police will not continue to waste their time by being nice. You know, my guess is they gave the person the benefit of the doubt, but,
Well, let's hope so.
yeah.
Because we want everyone to use common sense, we want our police to use common sense, and we like our trustees to use common sense as well. Thank you.
Yeah, for the record, could I have your name, please?
Aidone, A-I-D-O-N-E, first name Clement, title Doctor.
Thank you.
Any other public comment not related to anything on the agenda?
Not related, sorry.
Thank you very much. Ann Jaffe Holmes, 22 South Ferris, Greenberg, Green Policy Task Force member. I just want to remind everyone in the village to please fill out the Greenberg Town Survey on food scraps recycling in order to get our village on the pilot program for residential pickup. And you can email gptf at urbantony.gov in order, or .com, in order to get the link. I'll send you the link. .com, right? .gov. Thank you. Thank you. So sorry. And then the other thing is the recycling cans on Main Street. The public. Thank you very much, public. You are cooperating very well with the beverage container recycling cans on Main Street. And we'd just like to point out that where there is a trash can not paired with a recycling can, the public is putting recyclable beverage containers into those cans. So, and those are located at the firehouse, at Dutcher Street, and in front of Main Street School and the Aqueduct. They're unpaired cans. It would be a good thing to pair them so that the public can do the right thing in all locations. Thank you very much for those recycling cans, and to the public for cooperating so well. And the last thing is to remind everybody that Irene is causing an air quality problem in Westchester County. We received in 2018 an F on air quality in Westchester County, and one of the biggest problems is ozone, which is complicated by idling your car. So we encourage everybody to remember, don't bother idling your car, turn it off so that you can protect your neighbor's health. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other public comment not related to the agenda? Otherwise, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Anyone have any questions or comments on this? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second? All in favor? All right. Next up is a continuation of the public hearing to consider a local law amending the zoning code to create the North Broadway mixed-use district. Again, to give a little bit of history here, and then I'll let my colleagues expand on it. This started back when we had the comprehensive plan update, which was adopted May 21st, 2018. Before the comprehensive plan was updated, there was a Broadway corridor group that looked at actually all of Broadway, but the focus quickly became kind of the northern part of Broadway, because it was kind of a unique area with some open lots that had actually just been under a requested zoning change from an applicant. What came out of that was loud and clear that people wanted to preserve the look of what was there now currently. And that is definitely reflected in both the comprehensive plan and the recommendations that came out of there. I think some of the ways that we hope that the new zoning does that is by creating higher setbacks. Again, a lot of people say, as soon as you drive into Irvington, you know it's Irvington, because there's, the big open area. Right now, the setbacks are, I believe, 125 feet off of Broadway. We want to increase that to 250 feet, as well as limit it to two-story buildings back to 300 feet, rather than three-story buildings, 125 feet now. I think another thing that we looked at was, it's currently zoned residential, but hasn't been used for residential in over 50 years, in any of those lots. Or at least it's combined. I guess the Holy Spirit property is both a residence and a conference center. But other than that, I don't believe there's any residential in that area. The current offices could be expanded, so we kind of wanted to limit some of that potential expansion as well. So those were some of the big key goals that we had when we were doing this. We had one single-family zoning come before us as part, before the Brightview actually, and it really, we thought, detrimented the whole look because it had to flatten so much and create so much pavement, and the driveways and everything, it looked like a giant ski slope on that area rather than the kind of open area that we have now. So that was kind of the broad, big picture things that we looked at. I think we've had, 10 meetings, over a dozen, including work sessions, where we heard a lot of great feedback. It's definitely a much better proposal now than it was, 9 months ago. We continue to listen to what people have to say. We hope to hear some new things, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues now. If anybody wants to say anything before we open it up to the public.
Well, I'll add a few things, Brian. I think you hit a lot of the high points. I think what you said about preserving much of the look that it has right now was very much on our minds and on the minds of the members of the working committee for the comprehensive, that was a group of maybe 10 citizens. They were the working group for the comprehensive plan update. They met with Brian and with...
Yes,
Yeah, right. So there was a lot of input then. And then there were several more steps of input. But I think some of the overwhelming things that came up in these 9 or 10 meetings, specifically on this particular part of the comprehensive plan recommendations, that had been spoken about in the community for quite a while, as something that, things that would be helpful to do or have. One of them is a great need for affordable housing, and by some of the regulations in here, we think we are making that possible, that there could be some additional affordable housing. Another thing that is in here has to do with some of the historic structures that are on those parcels and protection of those. That's something that's important to many people in the community. This particular this rezoning does that as well. I agree with Brian that the setbacks, the increase in the setbacks was something else that I think was very much on the minds of many community members. So those are just a few of the high points that have been on our minds during those many meetings, and we've appreciated very much all the input from people during that time. And as Brian said, we're certainly listening tonight to hear some new issues that might come up, but I'll save more of my comments for later.
else?
Well, I would just add that, again, the purpose of this new zoning is to maintain the character of these large properties, not to leave them unchanged, not to leave them exactly as they are right now. And I think that we've done a good job, and I think that we've addressed quite a number of the issues that are being brought up, particularly in the petition that was signed by quite a number of residents, an impressive number of residents. But a lot of that's been addressed already. I want to, take into particular comment, a comparison of the possible development of a piece of property to what's existing there. I don't think is really a fair comparison. I think if you compare the possible development under the new zoning rules with what could be developed within the existing rules now, that in almost every case, the new zoning rules require smaller amounts of development than could be developed if nothing was changed at all.
Repeat the last sentence.
The new zoning would require a small amount of total build-out development than the existing zoning would allow if it was unchanged.
Anybody else?
The only very small comment we're making, which will be commenting as this goes on, is that the choice is not leave it the way it is or change it. It is going to change. Those properties are owned by people who are not necessarily committed to keeping them exactly the way they are now. There are certain permitted uses as the code is now written, but what we're trying to do is balance the needs of everybody in the village and come up with a plan that allows us to reasonably regulate what goes in those properties.
The other thing I was going to add, that I've been thinking a lot about, is how there are features in the new zoning proposal which actually give additional, more specifically stated tools to the planning board for them to make use of in their site review process that would occur with any site project that would come before them in order to get a special permit. There's things like specific indices of impacts on traffic. There's things like more stated support for protection of the walls and of the existing tree canopy, etc. There's more specific requirements in terms of screening requirements. There's trying to think what else. There's dark sky lighting, but that would be applied to any district at this point for any new development. There's also, based on community input from the last meeting we had, there's also a specific call out to ensure that emergency services would not be negatively impacted by a project that was coming forward to be considered for site plan development. There's a number of other ones, but I can't think of them all right now, except it did strike me that that it's a much stronger zoning regulation that I've seen in some of the rest of our code, and I think it gives good tools to the planning board.
Do you want me to go
I
through
was
the
just going to say,
changes?
before we
Yeah.
turn it over to the public, why don't we maybe go over the changes?
Yeah, it won't take long, because there was just a few changes, mainly to respond to comments that were made at the last meeting. There's a couple of other tweaks that I picked up as I read it, and I'll tell you what those are. One was in defining a senior living facility. Before it was defined as a facility containing independent living, assisted living, and full care living units. I added and/or because you might have one that doesn't have all three, but just has assisted living and full care. So that's really just a tweak.
Point of
Then-
personal privilege. Can you please speak loudly? Or in a manner in which we can
Speak closer to
hear?
the mic, Mike, we'll do it.
Nobody's ever accused me of not speaking loudly, but I'll
Excuse me.
try. I'll try louder. Then, this was added in response to comments at the last meeting, so that one of the special permit requirements for a senior living facility would be that the applicant must demonstrate to the satisfaction of the planning board that the proposed use will not negatively impact the village's emergency response systems, including the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps. It's something they would have had to look at anyway. They would have to do that in the secret review, but this just makes it absolutely clear and maybe would allay some public concern about that. Then this is just really a tweak, but there's a provision that says that the Board of Trustees could waive the 250-foot requirement on the setback from Broadway for some significant public interest. I changed it to waive or modify, because you may not want to waive it altogether, but just give them a 200 feet. All right, then, I don't know that this suggestion was specifically made at the meeting, but it was suggested, I think, by somebody who raised a concern about buildings being, lots being combined.
It
And
was,
that's-
Right.
This
It was
is-
brought up at the meeting.
Yeah, on page, it's, we might have different pages. Mine is page 7, it's number H, so if it's not on page 7, look on page 8, if it is with H. With maximum building size, no individual building may exceed 100,000 square feet in gross floor area. Underground parking shall not be included. I mean, that's really big, but that number was based on looking at the buildings that are in existence now, and actually, I think the Abbott House building comes pretty close, and then also 100,000 square feet was the size of the Brightview facility that the board, when it got down eventually to 100,000 square feet, and that was the number that the board was comfortable with. So that even if you combined 2 lots or your buildings.
There's none of the, other than the Abbott House lot, none of the current lots could have 100,000 square foot buildings, is that correct?
Could have 100,000? Yeah, no, you mean in
Which
terms
one?
of
Yeah,
the
sorry.
coverage under the,
Yeah.
oh, actually, on the Carafiello one, it could be 100.
Okay.
Almost 100 under the proposed zoning, 105, and then the Abbott House property, and the
Yes,
the
Abbott
large
House,
Holy
yeah.
Spirit property, the Great Big Holy Spirit property. That's a huge
Yes,
property.
that's as big as Abbott House, if not bigger, I think, right? It's very similar.
No,
It's-
no,
it's-
it's surprising. I mean, the existing building, it looks like it's,
No,
oh, you mean the
the
property? Oh, yeah.
Total
yeah,
size of the
It's like
property.
16 acres.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit one's, that's actually bigger than the Abbott House. It's almost 18 acres. Abbott House is almost 17 acres.
Marianne, you were saying that the Carafiello property could be up to 100,000 in new zoning.
Under the proposed zoning, it could have.
And how big
Now,
would it be under the existing zoning?
Under the existing zoning, well, if it were an institutional use, 159,000. And if
150.
it were an office, 129,000.
Okay. So even as an office space, it could be bigger than what the new zoning proposal would allow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the new
20%.
zoning reduces, on all of the builds, and all of the lots but one, it reduces the permitted coverage. And on that one lot, it keeps it the same.
Which
It
one is
doesn't increase
Carafiello?
it.
The big white building.
All right, then, I added, there's general site plan standards, and I added this one, that protected trees, as defined in section 202 of the village code, and that defines trees as 8 inches in diameter, 8 inches at diameter and at breast height, and then if it's on a steep slope, if it's 3 inches, defines protected trees, and then also, special kind of trees. And those can be removed only under the circumstances listed in the provision saying when you can have a tree removal permit, so you would have to follow those. Even though, right now, those wouldn't apply during site plan approval necessarily, but this would make them apply for any, make apply to any trees being removed. And That's it.
Okay, anybody else on the board? Yep. So what we'd like to do is hold everyone at the 3-minute time permit, permitted time. And then if you want to speak again, you can, but let everyone else speak first before you go second time.
Great if you say your name and come to the mic.
Hi. I know you. I've been here before. Hi, my name is Jennifer Friedman, and I'm a resident of Riverview Road. As I've spoken before, my property abuts the proposed new zone at the eastern edge of the Abbott House parcel up, pretty far up the hill. I have grown more concerned about the impacts the new zone would have both on my property specifically, as well as on the general welfare of the community. To be clear to everyone in the room, when many of us purchased our homes, we did so with an understanding that the property directly next to our own was zoned for single-family residences. This new zone would completely change what our neighboring properties could be, including businesses, hotels, etc. Combining the two sides of the zone, Riverview and Strawberry Lane side on the one end and the East Sunnyside edge, there are roughly, to my count, 30 homes that share this issue. Combined, not a small number of residents. When you include their immediate neighbors, which are all currently residential neighborhoods, more like 60 to 80 homes could be impacted, not to mention neighborhoods on Broadway and on the other side of Broadway, who I believe are here this evening. I have repeatedly requested reasonable accommodations to protect these neighborhoods, and in particular, I note you mentioned front setbacks, but I'm talking about the rear setbacks and side setbacks, which abut all of the current residential properties all around this zone. And I believe that they have not, to this point, been adequately addressed in the updated proposal. As a result, I wrote a letter that was co-signed by my 3 neighbors for the last meeting, and since then I joined with other concerned neighbors, and together we have collected 268 signatures on a letter that I am at this time submitting to you. So I don't know how I do that, but here's the letter, and
Give it to
this is-
Brenda.
Okay.
So there's anything you want us to, if you want to read something from the letter that you can address.
I will. So.
About 2 minutes.
Yep, I think that it's extraordinary, this large number of signatures that came in less than a week. Most of these signatures were created via change.org, which seem to sometimes identify a location based on an IP address. But I would like to point out that we believe that all of the signatures were in fact residents of Irvington, so it's mislabeled on the sheets that you'll see. Along with the online petition, we also are submitting handwritten signatures, which I just handed up, that were mostly collected from residents on the East Sunnyside border of the zone, near Terrytown. The petition we are submitting raises 5 specific concerns and concrete solutions. These are for the plan to have a minimal impact on current properties, to limit noise pollution, to consider the environmental impact of eliminating more woods, to ensure that the proposed building bulk or size is consistent with the small-town open space character of Irvington, and to ensure that the new zone actually has a positive financial impact on Irvington. Other co-signers of the petition will speak specifically to each of these points. I thank the board in advance for considering our concerns and proposed solutions. Given the significant concern of this large number of residents, I also request on our collective behalf that the board delay a vote on the new zone to allow more time for consideration of our proposals and appropriate responses, and also to directly address our specific and general concerns, which could include more opportunities for dialogue and robust discussion of the issues raised, as well as possible redrafts of the proposal taking into account our concerns. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Peter Bernstein from North Continent Street, and I'm here to read a letter on behalf of the Irvington Housing Committee, which I'm a member of. Our chair, Deb Flott, couldn't be here tonight. Other members of the committee are Susan Robinson, who is here, Karen Schatzel, and Tom Thacker. The letter has been sent to the trustees. It's a short letter. It says, Dear Mayor Smith and trustees, as members of the Irvington Housing Committee, we commend your efforts to proactively address the zoning of the remaining large parcels of land located in the area now designated the North Broadway Mixed-Use District. We have been closely following the discussions pertaining to the alternative outcomes of these properties, beginning with a comprehensive plan process undertaken in 2018, and appreciate the time, patience, and attentive care taken to identify the best possible uses for these properties. The focus of the Irvington Housing Committee is on the creation and preservation of housing units to meet the needs and income levels of all Irvington's residents. As such, we endorse the proposal to increase the density of any new housing which may take place along this corridor, so long as it does not substantially interfere with the ability of current residents to enjoy their properties, as well as the creation of an affordable housing fund offering an alternative to the creation of affordable units in any assisted living facility constructed on one of these parcels. We thank you for your continuing commitment to the creation and preservation of fair and affordable housing in the village. With regards, the Irvington Housing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. Thank you for listening. My name is Janet Murph. I live at 48 Park Avenue. My concern is noise or noise pollution from hospitality properties, in particular from outdoor events, dining, music, and parties. Imagine having to listen to a band or DJ every weekend from May through October. This is the reality of living near a facility that does outdoor events. Where we live is a quarter to a half mile from the main buildings of the Tarrytown Conference Center. The noise from the music, the crowd, and late-night traffic at this conference center has been disrupting peaceful weekend life in our neighborhood since the 1970s. Because the role of the DJ or band leader is to create a party atmosphere, the energy level and volume of the event increases as the night goes on, the volume and intensity of sound reaching its peak at the crescendo of the event at 11 p.m. every Friday and Saturday. There are nights when I can hear complete sentences encouraging the happiness of the bride and the groom. Hospitality events must book every weekend with weddings and parties to be successful. Restaurants and hotels with outdoor space often attempt to expand operations into larger events to increase their revenue. Please don't ignore the possibility of disruption to so many residents. In conclusion, I'm requesting that very specific wording that prohibits outdoor events for all hospitality properties be included in this rezoning document. I acknowledge, truly acknowledge, that all your work has been done over a long period of time and that this document is being challenged at the 11th hour. But I went door to door gathering signatures for this petition, and with the exception of one person, everyone who opened the door to me signed the petition. Along the way, I heard many comments, but the most common and almost unanimous was that the residents felt they were not being given information, they had no idea this had gotten so far, and frankly, they were upset. I know that you have gone through all of the correct processes, but this is just the information that I received from them, and I am trying to share that with you now. Please acknowledge our concerns. Please work to create a document that seeks to preserve the character of the village for all residents.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Reedy. I live at 20 Strawberry Lane. And for those people who are not aware of 20 Strawberry Lane, we're on 3 sides of properties which are going to be considered within rezoning. So we're effectively ground zero of this impact. We purchased our property 5 years ago. We purchased it because of the environment of this village, the leafy neighborhoods. We walk our children constantly up and down Strawberry Lane. And it's been a very important part of our life. And we signed and actually helped prepare the petition because we are still concerned with the current rezoning proposal. And there's a number of things which have been raised, but the one area which we're concerned about obviously is the impact of the residents most close to these particular, this particular rezoning. And there's one thing I do want to highlight and ask the village to consider is regarding the setbacks. And I recognize and applaud the village's efforts to try to protect the Broadway by setting setbacks between 250 to 300 feet. And that's very important, as that is a big sign of our village, and people love driving past it a couple of times a day and seeing that setback. The concern I have is the current setbacks of 50 feet in the rear, which is rear to our property. If I think I'm right, but if you look at the zoning requirements, 1F80s, the largest residential properties, which are typically under 2 acres in size, have a 75-yard setback on the rear. So I'm a little confused why large properties, which are over 4 acres, commercial use, which will involve us seeing everything from trash to loading, unloading, to a variety of things which you normally see in commercial use, can be as close to 50 feet from our property line. So I would ask the village to really reconsider that as part of their deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I think that 2 meetings ago, Mayor Smith, you said that zoning, when you read the numbers and look at the words, it's very abstract, but when you see the actual build proposals by developers, as you did with Brightview, it takes on a whole different tone. So I prepared a site plan and a bird's eye view and written calculations that show the development that could be allowed on the large Broadway lots. And I'll give you copies. Both you, Mayor Smith, and Trustee Kehoe said at the beginning that you were at the thrust of the comprehensive plan and of your work with the zoning proposal was to preserve the look of what's there now. And I think that these drawings show that this would do the opposite. The working group for the comprehensive plan on the Broadway corridor said that the Broadway corridor plays a major role in the village efforts to maintain a small town, open space character that has made Irvington the unique and desirable place it is to live, play, and work. So, aside from what's on the drawings, I just want to throw out some, perhaps, statistics that per this zoning, on the Maxon lot, the allowable building footprint could be 8.5 times that of the existing mansion. The floor area of the new building in the mansion, assuming the mansion is kept, would be 3.58 times the existing combined floor area. It could be 200 feet closer to Broadway than the mansion. And just to mention that those numbers assume the utilization of bonuses for affordable housing and for restoring historical building. And as I show on the drawing, the footprint would be 1.66 times larger than the footprint of the Main Street School next door. Sorry about all these dry sounding numbers. On the North Broadway lot, the allowable building footprint is 25 feet longer than a football field. Its south elevation is wider than a football field. It's 4.3 times larger than the footprint of the existing white building on that site. The floor area is 2.8 times the existing floor area of all the buildings on the site. And according to my calculations, no bonuses are required, and since building coverage is a controlling factor, it would be a strong incentive for a developer to demolish all the existing historic buildings. This new huge building could be 127 feet closer to Broadway than the large white building that's there now. And it would be almost twice the footprint of the Main Street School. Thank you.
Thank you.
I beg your pardon. Peter Buderi, I live on Meadowbrook Road.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Good evening. My name is Glenn Cashin. I live at 81 North Broadway, across the street from the subject property near Strawberry Lane. I just have a few points to make tonight. I I'm a signer of the petition that's been going around. I have great concerns for the proposed zoning changes. I think in the comprehensive plan where it points out that virtually all residents, respondents to the survey agreed that the Broadway corridor should remain as it's developed now, and it goes on mixed-use residential. I think the spirit of that is as it is used in existence today, right? I don't really see my neighbors today. There isn't a lot of noise, there isn't a lot of odor, there isn't a lot of traffic, and I think that's really the spirit of what I'm hearing out there as it pertains to the zoning changes. And I don't think that the character of boutique hotels or assisted living centers really fulfills the goals of the residents of Irvington to have peaceful, quiet lives. One final point I'd like to make is that in the comprehensive plan, what I really didn't see is a comprehensive financial analysis. So what is the actual financial impact to the village with a boutique hotel? What does that do to the tax base, if anything? What does it do to the expenses in the village? What does it do to trash collection? What are the actual impacts? I think before you consider voting for the zoning change, it's important that these things be ironed out, because once you vote this, you've lost your leverage. Right now, you can say no, right? But if you change the zoning, you can't say no. You are opening developers up to coming in and building boutique hotels or assisted living centers for which we really don't understand the full impact. So I thank you very much. I appreciate your service. I appreciate all of the effort that you've put in listening to the existing property owners and considering their position and ours as well. So thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm Stephen Croup. I live at Meadowbrook Road. I would just like to kind of emphasize what the gentleman just said. It's clear to me as a resident in Irvington that there's tremendous opposition to this, and it should be clear to you. Going back to all the meetings we had on Brightview, it was overwhelmingly that the residents were against this kind of development. And within a couple of days, the same kind of response was generated. And if I talk to any of my neighbors, it's clear that doing this changes the aesthetics of the village. And it's clear that however you want to phrase it, it's clear that the increased utilization of this corridor is a negative. It's also clear that I think almost everyone who's, spoken here or I've spoken to does not want to see Irvington turn into Dobbs Ferry or Tarrytown. And there's nothing in my mind that reassures me that, any development I've seen in Westchester has been of exactly the same type. And it has all been out of the character of this village. And what hasn't been made clear to me, given that this is the atmosphere of opposition, is to, as the gentleman just said, what is the benefit of all this? Where is the concrete analysis of how this benefits the village? And we are the village. We are the residents of the village. We are the ones who don't want this. And nobody has said to me, what is the overwhelming benefit of doing this, that it's worth changing the character of the village and changing the feeling of the people living here? I just don't get it, to be honest with you. So it makes me wonder, is there something else I don't understand? Is there some other motive? I would really appreciate it if someone could explain it to me. And that's it.
Basically, we want it to look similar to what it is now. That's to me is the number one thing we want. That's been commercial for 50 years, but it's not zoned commercial.
Yes, sir.
That to me is that was the crux of the whole thing, to preserve that without having, people keep coming in and.
But preserving that is not putting in an assisted living facility with traffic, ambulance response. I mean, it's just ludicrous to even think of it. I'm sorry, I'm to be so blunt.
Have you read the traffic piece that's in the current zoning?
No, I have not. I drive in Irvington all the time.
Exactly, so do we. So that's the bar. Honestly, a lot of these uses are almost impossible with the traffic. That's the traffic.
The only thing that I keep wondering, and again, I'm somewhat naive about all of this, is why can't it be developed with residential houses? Is there no developer who wants to do that? Is the tax base of doing that so much less than having an assisted living facility? It's just not worth it. I mean, unless there's some huge benefit.
I think, well, if you want to keep it open the way it is now, then single-family homes are not going to keep that the way it looks now. So if you just want it to look like other parts of, then that's fine.
But single-family homes and the office building that this gentleman referred to don't account for 24-hour-a-day emergency responses to an assisted living facility, to outdoor music events, to people from out of the neighborhoods coming to work there, to visit there. They don't in any way approach what you guys are talking about allowing, the potential to what you are allowing. And as somebody said, once you open the door, if that potential is there, I don't think anyone in this room has faith in developers to respect our feelings in that regard. And if the Board of Trustees doesn't respect our feelings in that regard, there's no hope for the developers to be respecting it. So that's all I have to say, really. But please, what is the game? I mean, can someone explain that?
Yes.
My name is Neil Marr. I don't live in the area. I live up on One Shady Lane. I think the game is that they're trying really hard to preserve the view without having it be homes right on Broadway, all along Broadway. And I think what everyone here is saying is that we need some compromise. We need to somehow preserve the view, but also limit the development. So what I'm hearing is that there is more work to be done, that people really want to be involved in that work, and that people are open to some sort of different rezoning agenda. This is just my hearing of it, but it seems to me like people are still desirous of information and ready to keep working on this. So that's just my take on it.
Anybody else?
Rita Milo, Meadowbrook Road. I agree with what has been said already. I certainly am not at all happy with the way this appears to be. There are a lot of things. There are, for instance, why do we want an assisted living here in Irvington when there's one in Brightview is right down the road. It's huge. It has very few people living in it so far, across from the Stop and Shop. No one's using it. Why do we want another one here in Irvington? The traffic, the past few years, the traffic has tripled on Broadway, right down that street. I know, I live there. I'm 2 houses away from what's going to happen here. I come to the corner at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I have to wait for 5 minutes before I can get on the road because there's so much traffic, and that goes on till 7 o'clock at night. There's one house been built on the street across from all of this, and it's caused traffic on our street for a year. We have cars parked on our street every day from that house being built. That's just one little house. What's this going to do to our neighborhood? I've been here for 30 years, and it's a lovely area. And if it changes, this would make a tremendous difference, and that's what we all feel about it. There's a few other things that were running through my mind, but I've forgotten them. But that's what I feel. Okay.
Anybody else? Please.
Hi,
Audrey Feinberg, 39 Circle Drive, but my driveway is on Strawberry Lane. I've been involved in this process from weeks, so I think the board knows my opposition, and I'm not going to repeat that. I'd like you to think about 2 points. One, I think what you're hearing tonight from the community is all of the admittedly very hard work that the board has done to put some restrictions for noise, light, special permits, lot size, and I know you've tried hard to limit the impact on the community. I think what you're hearing tonight is it's not enough. And I would urge you to consider leaving the zoning where it is. All of those things are in the nature of tweaks, and unless, as the mayor just said, it really makes it impossible for somebody to build, we're going to have a major increase in traffic, noise, light, weekends, everything else. A quiet office building has a little bump of traffic at 9 in the morning and at 5 at night, nothing evenings and weekends. A bigger office building, probably the same. And all of the uses you are considering, no matter how many restrictions you put on, are going to be a lot more than that. So please consider just not doing this. That's the first point. The second, I keep hearing about the Greenway. So we need to talk about these parcels a little bit differently, and we keep lumping them all together. But Maxon and Abbott House don't affect this Greenway idea at all. Maxon has a wall in front of it, and Abbott House is past Broadway. So whatever slight benefit that for the life of me I don't get about this green entryway compared to what a hotel would look like, there's zero benefit for those 2 parcels. And those 2 parcels are plunk in the middle of a lot of residences. I think it was Ms. Friedman who gave you some numbers about how many houses are surrounding them are going to be affected by having a major commercial development like right across the quiet street. So let's talk seriously about Maxon and Abbott House. We also have the Strawberry Lane traffic problem there, which you're well aware of. The village doesn't own Strawberry Lane. Strawberry Lane is non-conforming. Strawberry Lane is already a traffic hazard, and unless you're going to make the Maxon folks have the entrance from Broadway, which, as I understand it, may not be feasible for a commercial development, there really isn't any increase in use that's acceptable on Strawberry Lane. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to all these meetings. Anybody else? Please.
Walter Montgomery. I'm here because I'm the chairman of the board at Abbott House. I'm a resident of Strawberry Lane, and I can say out of empathy that I think you guys have done a terrific job of listening and trying to address people's concerns, and I know you've done a heck of a lot of work. I would like to suggest that a compromise position is one that's outlined in the petition that was presented by James Raby and others, because it puts some specific restrictions, suggests some specific restrictions for the rezoning, and I think that they're probably more specific than ordinarily rezoning would be, or any zoning proposal would be. But this is such an extraordinary effort you've undertaken that I think trying to be a little bit more specific and trying to be extraordinary is justifiable. Also, I would like to reiterate what I said 2 weeks ago, and that is that I hope the board will undertake a very strong lobbying campaign with the state to improve safety on, excuse me, on Broadway, with added crosswalks, perhaps some sort of light, added signage for speed control, whatever it might be. It's probably going to require hiring a traffic expert to undertake that kind of analysis. But let's please pursue that. That's all I have to say, and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Very good. Anybody else? We thank everyone again for sharing their opinions, for sending in their letters, for organizing and coming up. Actually, I specifically like this particular, the most recent petition we got that had the not only the issues but also potential solutions, which is I found very helpful. You know, I think the one to me that brings the most true is probably that rear setback from 50 to 75. Yeah, speaking for myself, but, I don't know, if anyone else have comments, questions, issues?
I made a number of notes. I have 5 or 6 specific notes that I'd like to, I think that it's worth reviewing in our next work session and seeing how we can address them. And I'd also like to, and one of them is actually looking back over in more detail, the petition with some of the suggestions in it to see, because I think they, I know at least one of them is echoed in terms of the setbacks against residential properties. So that to me seems to be, I don't want to call it a simple fix, but it seems to be something that we can certainly discuss.
And actually, I would like to, I don't usually do this, but the Rabies have actually been unbelievable at trying to work on this. And I think you have a young family, and to come out here, I know is very difficult as someone who started.
Babysitting built into you guys.
I'll split it with you for tonight. But when I started as mayor, I had young kids, and I know how hard it is to come out on these nights. So I appreciate you guys have been here again and again and shared a lot of. You've changed this bill a lot, or this proposal a lot so far. So I just want to say thank you very much for that. Ms. Feinberg as well. He's been here many, many times.
Without dinner on the train.
So we appreciate that as well, and then to all of you that have come. Neil, again, you've sent us a lot of letters.
And also for the generation, this is something that we need to discuss, the generation of this particular interpretation of the build-outs, because I can tell you that these are different from what I think we've seen from our
that obviously took a lot of work, Mr. Derry, so I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think that means we're going to keep the hearing open, and at our next work session, work on some of these issues that were brought up tonight.
I think our next work session, there are always public work sessions. I think interested parties ought to attend. And I would just want to add a little quote from one of Neil Maher's letters, "Democracy can be sloppy."
But I can tell you, this is a lot better proposal than we had, 6 months ago, or whatever, 9 months ago, whenever we started this process. So it's all because of your input. So thank you for that. And I do live right in the zone too. I actually back up to Abbott House, so I'm right there with you on a lot of the concerns. But to your point, do I see some potential pros? I do. And to me, it's the viability of that area. I think is important. I think it's a unique area in Irvington. Other than obviously Bridge Street and Main Street, it's the only other commercial district. I guess you could say Columbia, but that's it's a not-for-profit. It's a completely different animal. It is one of the last areas we could potentially put in some real, affordable housing that would actually have an impact. I mean, I've been very proud of the 1 and 2s we've added, but to have a real impact, I think that's one of the last remaining areas. So that's one of the end games, if you will, if we could get someone to put in. I mean, I look just to the north of this property. The co-ops there, to me, are the gems of Irvington. And I think the same thing about Buckout Street. There's only so many $4 million homes you need to sell. To have a real community, you need to have places where you can have young families as well as older people move in. So I tell people all the time, like, I can't afford Irvington. And I've had a lot of those people look on Buckout Street or at 120 or 140 or 14 South. We're super lucky, and I can't imagine us trying to propose a co-op right now in Irvington. We'd be booed off the stage, and I think that's unfortunate. And this is one of the last pieces of property. There's something that could potentially happen, so we don't want to lose that. We want to potentially have that, and we want to still try to preserve the open space and improve traffic safety and all those things. That's what we're trying to accomplish, and I thank all of you for giving your input and trying to help us achieve that. So that's where I'll leave that for now. Anyone else has anything to say? Hey,
Just to reiterate, what we're talking about is working on some of the specific suggestions in some of the proposals. We are not talking about, oh, never mind, you know, we are not, we have a lot of, many of you have acknowledged a great deal of work and thought has gone into trying to formulate a proposal that meets the needs of the village as a whole, that enables reasonable use that is not going to be exactly the same as it is now, but recognizes the fact that there are going to be changes, and we better be ahead of what they are, instead of just waiting. So, again, I agree if we have a work session, but we're going to be looking at specific ways of making this better, as we have done with many proposals. But this is not an unusual process for us. We propose something and everybody gets up and says, no, that's not gonna work.
Yeah, and I think also, one last thing I'll say, is we've been very lucky that the property owners have been good stewards. We were very close to when the Carrifield property sold to having what people I don't think would have been super happy with, which would have been a not-for-profit and potentially not, people that have a reputation for not having, just now, it would have been a not-for-profit, which there's nothing we can do to prevent that from happening under any zoning. But I think allowing to have uses that make it more attractive, at least give you a level playing field than just kind of selling to the lowest bidder that, potentially will, not be a great use and necessarily not be great, kind of neighbors and things like that. We've been very lucky to have great owners of those properties that have cared about everything as much as we have. And that isn't always the case. We have to, try to, modernize the zoning a little bit too.
Can I possibly say something?
Sure.
I just wanted to point out that the petition with the signatures, the 268 signatures, is not substantive in nature. In other words, it doesn't say we object to this kind of development, we object to that kind of, it's all, in other words, it's not saying we don't agree with affordable housing, we don't agree with an assisted living or any particular kind of development. It's all about feet and density and things that can be addressed depending on what that applicant might be. So I kind of wanted to just be clear, because I think that there are others who have specific critiques of one particular kind of development or another, but that petition doesn't critique any one particular kind of development. It's really more about protecting via residences, via traffic, via noise, which I think is important to everyone.
Good, thank you.
I would just like to say, as Brian, that I'm very happy. This is what democracy looked like. We're very happy to have public input. We're neighbors too. I mean, I don't happen to live there, but we're just like you, only we happen to come to all these meetings. But I guess the thing that I would love, and it's a lot of homework, and maybe you all have, but to simply read through the entire proposal. There's a whole lot of details, and if if there are things that you're not familiar with or you didn't know was in there, maybe you'll go, oh, well that, I understand that, why that's in there now. So it might be helpful, that's all I'm saying. And maybe you've all read every line of it, but it shows where we are. You could even try to look at the original one, but that would be, and I would also suggest that there are meetings that you can watch online and see where we were at a certain point, what input we got, and what happened and what changed. So if for those people that do read it carefully, I'm sure whatever work session we set up, I'm not sure what our schedule will be. I'm sure some people could plan to come.
Is there a way to get the old version? Is it online somewhere that we can get access to it?
Is it still back under the...
It's not posted online, no. They get replaced as they get updated.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if like an old email blast or something.
Yeah, if you want to see the original, the very original one, I don't know. That would be a problem.
I can send it to you, or it'll be in my files.
Just the most recent one versus this one. So
sure.
Oh, the most recent one?
Just the most recent one, so we can see the
the most
comparison.
recent one is
Oh, here, I can
He wants to look at the original, he wants to see how it's evolved. Or...
It's not going to help you much. I read those changes. There's like a few tweaks.
No, not the original that you're working on.
He means the original, like the first draft versus the current draft.
I thought you said not that one. I can, yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
What is the zoning before the rezoning was completed?
Oh, the current zoning.
Current zoning, that's what I'd like to see.
Well, that's online. If you go, If you go to the village code online,
Great.
and then, it's the, I think right now it's the R40 district, right?
One at 40, yeah.
Yeah, the one at 40 district, and that'll tell you more how that's regulated.
And then there's the Broadway corridor overlay, right? The Broadway buffer overlay?
No, it's not, there's no overlay, it's just a good Broadway buffer requirement, but they
Yeah, but that's not in the
No, I mean, there are, of course, there's other provisions in the code that apply, they want to see what the setbacks are and the uses are in their district, is the one at 40.
So the online shows you the current zoning that would be in effect, the details of it, and there are a lot of details in that current. To know what that is, then know what the current, the very most current iteration, and then if you're interested in where we started when we did our first redo of the current one. So those are three different things that, again, if you want to dig into the details, and even like the last meeting, we responded to the issue of the ambulance. So that's happened every time. So be it.
So the only thing I would ask is please don't mix them up, because we do, these are works in progress, and we incorporate changes upon changes, and it so frequently happens in some cases, but you said, isn't it? No, that was 3 months ago, we have 6 changes since then, so please, if you're going to be distributing, be clear what's what.
Okay. Pat wants to, Pat, come on.
Rick?
Good evening, Patrick Nettarelli, 29 Maple Street. I just want to commend the board and the Comprehensive Planning Committee for the great job that you did, and a lot of work that went into it. And there are a lot of good comments here this evening. I think the board has to take those into account and look at them a little bit further. I just had a couple of process comments that I think in reading through this. I saw that basically it's going to be up to the planning board to grant the special permit for any development that occurs out there, but there are 2 places where the Board of Trustees has the ability or the sole discretion to increase the height of the building or to increase the FAR slightly. And I would just say this, I think again, this is getting farther down the line when somebody comes in with a site plan and the board starts looking at those issues. My recommendation to you would be that if the board is going to be the determining factor on that, there should be something in here that says that it's with the recommendation from the planning board. Because I think somebody's going to have to come in here with a site plan to present to you and show you what they want to do. And if you start making recommendations or approving portions of the site plan, you're going to hamstring the planning board in what they then are able to do. So I would suggest that you just make it a recommendation that the planning board gives comments to the Board of Trustees if you're going to make the final determination on those 2 items. And the other thing is, there also was, in talking about affordable housing, I saw there was something in here that the developer could put money towards affordable housing in lieu of building it. My suggestion to you is, if you can speak to my former colleagues at the planning department, but I think what happens is, in those cases where municipalities take in the money rather than the units usually do not get built. And I think if you've got a position where the developer has to build it, you're much better off because the units will then get built.
I think that's only in assisted living.
Oh, okay.
Because it's not real estate, it's services, and that's harder to ask for a certain number designated affordable housing, so that's the purpose of that.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Well, you still might look at that though also, because I think, even the town of Greenberg may have something in their ordinance too regarding the assisted living. Okay? Those are the comments.
Thank you. Please.
Just one more question. I've heard from a lot of my neighbors that,
You have to go up to the mic.
I still, Kimberly Brady, 20 Strawberry Lane. I still hear from many of my neighbors and other residents of Irvington that single-family residences are still preferred. My question to the board is, in your next working session, would you consider reopening that discussion, if not for all of the parcels of land, for the ones that may work? I'll just leave the question to you. I've heard the aesthetic reason as to why not, but if a developer could make it work aesthetically and financially, would you consider leaving that as one of many viable options?
I know we discussed it, and I think there was some difference of opinion on the board, but I mean, we can always consider it again, but the majority of the board was not in favor of single family, other than
Attached
attached single family.
Yeah, I just, again, restate that many of the neighboring community to those parcels, that is still by far the strong preference from what I'm hearing, so I just...
One of the
That's all,
issues
but-
just historically, if I can recall correctly, through the haze, but with Brightview, what happens is the property values are so high, or they were trying to get very high property values, that then it really limits the kind of single-family housing that gets developed, because then they have to become maximized and become, more than, multi-million-dollar units.
Why can't you let commercial work that out? Why would you shut that out? And why not just let it play out if that's going to be happening?
We'll discuss it at the work
Yeah.
session.
It wouldn't have to be, the IF 40 or IF 80 or even smaller. I just wanted to ask you to consider that again.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have one other suggestion. Sorry.
Sure.
And I know it was at I think our initial request around the traffic constraints. I like to think I'm relatively educated, but I can't make heads or tails of what this actually means. And so it may give people some comfort concerning about the traffic impact if someone could sort of convert it to layman's terms about what a no action condition in NOS E or F with a action condition as defined by the Transportation Research Board Highway Capacity Manual, latest edition. That, and I don't know, does anyone else know? Could someone give us a teach-in? I think if you could somehow get that explained in layman's terms, you'll give people a sense about what you'll do. And secondly, my other concern is, how do you enforce it? It's one of those things where you could get convinced on some survey that it seems fine, but it's built and the traffic's worse. It's done. You can't stop that. You can't stop them having traffic. So,
Except for the special permit has to be reviewed. Center like Mercy College, that's a big issue.
so
So in other words, like Mercy College had they went from a small kind of campus to a big campus.
Yep.
And they put a lot more restrictions on them than try to renew their permit.
okay.
I mean, yes, you'd have the pain, like we were wrong, but,
Okay, and maybe that's, and then I must have missed that fact will be reviewed over a period of time. But at least some layman's terms to explain what this all means.
yeah, because there is like certain number of cars and how much waiting time, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But we had like an hour session on it, so we can get that information.
But just
I think
just in layman so we can
Yeah, I
understand what
think
it means.
it is helpful, I guess.
Yeah.
I do recall, we had one meeting like that, again, you can flip back through those online.
Each one tells you how long you could wait. Like that's what each of the things is, and what we came up with is you
So it starts at 45 minutes for Eppington to peak hour and then goes beyond that?
Yeah, whatever it is now, you can't actually make it worse, is basically what it says. So that's why I said it's a very high bar to like when we break it down by and I think Caesar's nodding because he's the only one who's looking at traffic. Is my wife. Oh, he's also an engineer. But that's a good thing to do. Yeah, absolutely. Tonight's my wife's birthday, so happy birthday.
What did you think I was nodding to, and I'll let you know?
About the traffic and how it's limiting.
Yeah.
Caesar's an engineer, so that's why I was hoping he was nodding in agreement. Anyone else? Walter?
Well, again, I'd like to say that I know you guys have worked very hard on all of this, and there's absolutely no reason to question your motives, and every reason to praise the effort that you put into this. I know from personal experience. With regard to the Raby petition, I'd also like to say, responding to Connie, that I know from personal experience also that they have gone through they've gone through the rezoning proposal in great detail, and the others have worked on that petition. And I still think it's an excellent approach because it's a compromise approach. I think it makes sense for that reason. It addresses a number of interests. However, at the risk of sounding like a curmudgeonly old man, which I may well be, I would like to sound a contrarian note on the issue of, or perhaps contrarian note to many people, apparently, on the issue of assisted living. There may be others who support this view. I, for one, do not want to see, and I have to say this, I think, because everyone else I've heard has said, well, assisted living, that's just terrible for Irvington. However, if you've lived here, this is a self-absorbed thing, but I do think there might be other people who could agree with the perspective. If you've lived here for 34 years, in my case, and I guess this is very self-absorbed, and you've been in public service here for 20-plus years on virtually every board, right? And you paid really high property taxes on various homes, and suddenly you get old and you want to stay in your community. You don't want to be told, oh, you got to go to Dobbs Ferry. You can't stay in Irvington. Now, to me, there's something wrong with that particular concept, right? And I just want to say I'd like to keep assisted living on the table. It's selfish, perhaps, but again, there may be other people who can empathize with that perspective. But anyway, thank you for listening. I won't say anything else.
Do you have a date for the next working meeting?
The 11th. I think it's the next Wednesday. It's not the 11th. 15th, 16th?
No, it's the 11th.
It's the 11th. It is the 11th.
March 11th.
It's a week from Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Yeah. It's, our regular meetings are Mondays. Work sessions. First and third are our regular meetings, and second Wednesdays.
Ronnie, can I just say, when people keep talking about the Raby petition, which I...
That's this one. What was the day one referring to as that?
There's the one with the numbers in it.
It's the one that's, yeah, it has issue and solution.
Okay.
Stop rapping. Oh, yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you all for spending time with us again on this issue. The Climate Smart Community and Climate Change Education
Level of service. Service east to west, just like grades of school. To me, that's just very
I've read that. Because it's not necessarily viable.
I think it's actually, but I've never.
They all trouble something.
The other thing is when they talk about, yeah, they said 250, and I believe this is just up, the other gentleman got up with all the numbers. He said there will be areas it's only 127 feet.
Yeah, we have to look at that.
No, that's concerned. One other thing is allowing that third story, it's a back slightly higher.
It's allowed now.
First 20 minutes.
It's allowed now. Yeah, we're actually pushing it back.
Ways to go.
No problem.
I said, well, they'll say everything you want to say. Anyway, you guys are, I've been doing a lot of hard work and I compliment you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to the meetings.
Okay.
Climate Smart Community, Climate Change, Education, and Engagement, Larry?
So I think well, the resolution speaks for itself, so I'll let you read that, but it was requested by our Climate Smart Communities Task Force and is one of the required elements to earn points towards our certification.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Larry, I'm sorry.
So the resolution is was requested by the Climate Smart Communities Task Force. It's a requirement for the board to be behind the education effort that's ongoing. So that's, the resolution itself speaks for itself.
Whereas the Village of Irvington wishes to be certified as a climate smart community, and whereas the Village of Irvington recognizes that public education, outreach, and engagement are critical to the effort to prepare communities for the effects of climate change and assist the public in mitigating these effects. And whereas these steps are necessary to assist residents and municipal workers in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and adaptation of the current and future effects of climate change, now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Irvington Board of Trustees hereby establishes a program led by a committee of concerned residents to assist in the training of municipal employees and to develop outreach, educational materials, and public events to engage and educate residents and municipal employees alike about steps to mitigate and to adapt to the effects of climate change. I'll make the motion. Can I have a second? All in favor?
You know, Brian, I just wanted to say that I, as liaison to the Climate Smart Communities Working Group, Committee, whatever it's called, there's a lot of really enthusiastic, there's a lot of skilled and knowledgeable people on it, and they're really moving ahead nicely with a fairly tight schedule. So, with the goal, of course, being ready in early June?
Very early July, so we want to be ready in the middle of June.
Yeah, to submit for bronze certification for the village. So I've been impressed by the enthusiasm and the commitment of the volunteers on the committee.
Excellent. Next up is a budget workshop, an overview, where we stand currently.
As mentioned earlier, we have one more department to review, that's the Recreation and Parks Department, which we'll do next week. What I've done is I've put together where we stand right now in total requested expenditures. They come to just under $500,000 in requested expenditures. In revenues, we have an increase of about $342,000, the bulk of which is the change in the sales tax. And then you have proposed a slight change in theater revenues, and so that's really the crux of the change there. We will still review the revenues and see if we can maybe increase some of them or adjust them to whatever the market is doing. But that has to still be reviewed. So, lastly, when you take the difference between the increase in expenditures against the revenues, it's an increase of tax levy of $156,000. So we're very fortunate that the increase in the sales tax really offsets most of the expenses, and the balance of $156,000 is the amount that would need to be levied to balance the budget. That's on the first page. So what I contrasted with the expenses, the revenues, and the tax levy. The last row on the last column, that represents a 0.30% increase in the tax rate. We're waiting from Greenberg, the final roll. They do set that in pretty much any day now, because they'll need that roll to do the county and town tax. They're working on it, and I should have that by the end of the week. So hopefully by the next budget meeting, I'll give you what the actual assessed roll will be. I've accounted for the last roll that we've received and taken out the restoration of the exemption that you've approved last week. And they were still settling some more small claims assessment reviews. I put a buffer in for that. So given those items, we're looking at really a 0.30 increase in the tax rate. It's a relatively very good position to be in at this point in the budget. The second page...
Excuse me one second, I'm sorry. Is there a reason to meet with Mary Ann after the meeting, or are we good here?
Nice.
Yes? I'm sorry, okay, good.
Mine is not very long. It's
Sorry.
Mary keeps telling me.
I know I was, and then I changed my mind. I'm sorry.
Get me in trouble.
Yeah, not at all. It would have been on me.
One question I have is the fund balance where do we stand on that? 'Cause I see we're
I
gonna
did
keep.
no change to it. So
Well, I see we're still, I see what we're appropriate, but how's the fund balance itself? Is it still, like, do you know what the balance is in that?
I can give a projection.
Yeah,
for
we can do
next
that for
week.
next
I'm
time.
happy to do
That'd be
that.
great.
I think that too will be in a good position, but I'm happy to do
Yeah,
that.
just so we have to tweak that down.
Especially since we have the increase in the sales tax, right there is a large amount. So it will be a healthy end of the year. I'll prepare that for next week. And then on the tax cap worksheet, I plugged in the levy that we have at this moment. It's $525,000. I'm sorry, that's the levy limit. Projected tax levy is next to the last line. It's $15,002. So what you see on the bottom is that of a 678 potential tax levy that you could impose and still be in compliance, we're under the tax amount by $523,000. So if you only used up about $156,000 of the potential.
Does that carry over to another
I can calculate how much of that could be carried over. There's a formula.
Yeah.
And I can let you know by next week also how much that would be.
If something happens next year and we need it for some reason?
I can tell you how much it could be by next time. I can tell you how much. There's a formula for that. I can tell you.
There's always a formula.
Always a formula. Yeah.
We've typically carried over levy each year.
Yeah.
Pretty much consistently.
One year we lost some, we left it on the table, and we lost a little bit, but not very much.
Yeah. But like, for example, in this worksheet, about 2/3 of the way down, there's a line that says prior year carry forward of $189,125 that was carried from last year. So each year we try to be conservative if we can, obviously, and same thing this year.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks for that. We're in good shape. Hopefully the wreck doesn't blow it up. Just kidding, Jeff. You'll find out. Next is the reports of board, standing committees, and officers, trustee liaison reports. Start with you, Mark.
Not too much, just tomorrow night, 7:15 is the tree commission meeting. It's regular, first and third Tuesdays. It's in the library, local history room. Took me a minute to get that out. And that's about it for now.
Great. Jack?
The Housing Committee is meeting this Thursday at 7:30, somewhere. Usually in the Tiffany Room, but I'm not sure it's been announced. For rec, there are 3 spots left in session number 2 of Teamscape. Session 1 is closed. RPAC meets on Wednesday, the 18th, 7 p.m. in the Senior Center. There will be a donuts, cakes, and coffee get-together at the Senior Center Friday, March 6th at 9 a.m., no fee. The Irvington Woods Committee will hold their March meeting on the 19th, 7 p.m. in the O'Hara Nature Center. Community Advisory Board will hold their next meeting the 10th, 8 a.m. in the Senior Center. IS Executive Board meets next Tuesday, 17th, 8 a.m. in the Senior Center. Youth baseball and softball registration's been extended. Please consider registering. We can use some players. The Memorial Day Parade Committee is scheduled to meet Monday, March 23rd, 7 p.m. in the Senior Center. Day camp registration begins on Wednesday, April 22nd. The Irvington Woods Committee presents Apple Grafting Workshop at the O'Hara Nature Center, Saturday, April 18th. Be held from 1 to 2:30. Pre-registration is required. 25 participant maximum, $25 per person. C.J. Riley is the instructor. There will be an announcement to the start date of the Matheson Park Playground Renovation Project later this week. It will include date the park will be closed to the public. Residents please pick up and take their dog bags with them in the woods, on the trails, the aqueduct, or Holsley Pond. The dogs must be unleashed in the woods or Holsley Pond. Thank you.
Connie?
Yeah. Okay, so the water department, there are a lot of regular things. It's always a significant list, but I'll just mention that they're working on a a sewer leak coming from Astor Street Pump Station. That's a lovely high point in my report. And that the highway department, again, doing all the things that they always do so well. There was a winter storm number 6, listed as 213. 2-13, I'm not quite sure what that means, freezing rain.
February 13th?
Oh, February/13, February 13th.
That's a date.
Okay. Well, maybe it was 2/13 of an inch of freezing rain, okay. And then for people near Croton Place, I mean, they probably noticed that the Aqueduct parking lot was all clean, the lines were painted, the guardrail and all that, and they cleaned the east side of Croton Place. And there were some other things that were wonderful. I would note, I mean, of course, the theater has had a spelling bee on Friday night. It was a high point for many people with the mayor on stage for a few fine moments. Didn't have to spell anything. Yes, there's always something else going on at the theater, and I suggest people look at the program. Okay. Dennis?
Okay, for Village Court, the 43 charges received from 2-1 to 3-1 and 89 charges disposed, as usual, the vast majority in vehicle and traffic, for a total of $11,049 money collected and remitted to the state controller. For the fire department, the report as of February 27th, 8 calls in the month of February, 43 calls year to date. Training continues with active shooter. Chiefs continue to meet with IPD, GPD, and the Greenberg paramedic. This month's training includes, in February was pest harassment and right to know training, and in March 3rd, which is tomorrow, search and rescue, and hazmat on March 17th. New boiler is working through King's insulation. And then my favorite for the library, you better hurry up and register because I'm going to. We'll be celebrating Dr. Seuss's birthday on March 3rd with a special program for children ages 4 and older who can hear Dr. Seuss stories and make a special Seussian craft. I bet it's a hat. Also a new art display by Meg Lindsay. Reception will be on Saturday, March 7th at 2. On March 11th, Irvington School Superintendent Dr. Christopher Harrison will be at the library for an informal conversation about the school system, initiatives, and goals. And there will be an Ides of March pizza party on March 12th from 5:30 to 6:30. Participants will make laurel wreath headbands, and if they bring sheets, will be shown how to make them into togas. And please check the library's website. There's always wonderful opportunities to participate. Thank you.
Anything else?
Anything else? No? Moving on.
I had one thing to mention. I had spoken to Desmond Lyons about the water cooler back here, and he says that, he's not really in charge of it in the sense that his office assistant is. But what he suggested was maybe having her work with Brenda to just be sure that there's always enough water down here. I'm trying to get us off the bottle, weaned off the bottles, so Brenda, maybe
We'll
you
work on reusable mugs.
speak with her.
I'll take that job.
Maybe a larger one, I don't know.
Or even just a spare one for everybody's.
Spare.
And the only other thing would be that
Trust
something,
the business.
something that's reusable rather than these guys.
And then I'm going to work on getting water bottles for everybody.
From
Personalized.
Personalized, yeah.
At BOT, you mean, or
Yeah.
with
It's one of the perks of being on the board of
Yeah.
trustees.
so that would be really nice.
Name 3.
Big hitter.
I don't know what the nicknames are.
You'll have to wait. I'll sign everybody. Village Administrator's Report.
So just a quick update that on Wednesday, we are having a pre-construction meeting with the contractor for Matheson Park. So we're expecting to sign contracts then, and that's where some of that information may come from about the future schedule. We're also waiting actually for final approval from New York State DOT on the Station Road Main Street award that you already made, but you made it subject to DOT, and we have not gotten the go-ahead just yet, but it's really paperwork-based and everything's moving along. Also, I attended a meeting today of Sustainable Westchester relating to the recycle right application or sanitation calendar application, whatever you want to call it. It was a group of communities that were the first ones to do it in the county, which we were part of.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of a debriefing session as to what worked, what didn't work, how we publicized it, how we should have. It's a little information sharing meeting, so it was very good.
I use it.
Yep. Well, we're second behind Greenberg in terms of the usage, but if you look at it on a percentage basis, we're definitely ahead of them in terms of number of addresses, you know, so it's interesting.
All right.
Next is the clerk treasurer's report.
Nothing further tonight.
Village attorney's report.
None.
Public comment. Review of action items. I didn't have anything
So
specific.
then, yeah.
We fixed the law.
Well,
Fixed the law.
yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna write that one down.
No, please don't.
No, but we should determine if we're gonna have a regular work session or a special work session to review this. Because I think it's gonna.
But didn't you
it's gonna
already
be-
tell people next Wednesday?
I think we told people next Wednesday,
Yeah.
which is fine, but we've got to schedule that out in terms of the budget workshop that we have scheduled that night, and.
Yeah, and if we could always send out an email and say it's not, if we can't do it for next Wednesday.
But that could work.
Well, then it's a cover-up.
No, of course. All right. Let's,
I'll make a motion to adjourn if I can have a second. Second. All in favor? Opposed?